Shalom. Some of you who are my students, you must have come across a quote I normally use to describe the purpose of my course. And this quote came from late Dr. Miles Muro. He said that when the purpose of a thing is not understood, abuse is inevitable. When the purpose of a thing is not understood, abuse is inevitable. Use obviously came from Latin word usus. For some of you who know Latin, when you add a suffix to a word, it changes its meaning to opposite. So absus, which is ab, added in front of us, means misuse. And to misuse something means to use that thing against the original intent of the manufacturer. For instance, the microphone here that I'm using to hear my voice is used to amplify my voice, right? Now, if I use it for telephone, it's an abuse of the microphone. When the purpose of a thing is not understood, abuse is inevitable. And that's why, if you are using anything that I've bought, maybe you bought a phone, it comes with what we call manual, right? Manual is a description of how the manufacturer wants you to use what you are buying, what they have manufactured, so that you can get an optimal result. And obviously, if you look at it in a deeper perspective, the Bible is the manual of life. When God created us, there's a book written where everything about life is found. Guidance, direction, stories. Timothy tells us that it's written to guide us. In the gospel today, what we are reading today didn't just start now. At the beginning of the book of Mark, there was already an altercation between Jesus and the religious leaders. If you were at Mass yesterday, you heard how they accused him for his disciple getting a corn and all of those, and it's very challenging and troublesome. What is going on here? Who wrote the law? Who is the author of the law? At this point in time, let us remember that the Jews have not yet accepted, don't understand the concept of what Jesus is as a Messiah, because they want to be liberated from the Roman Empire. So their concept of Messiah is not the Messiah that Jesus has come to bring. And they can't even accept that he's Son of God. The whole challenge was because even the Pharisees and religious leaders don't understand the purpose of the Sabbath law. And the challenge of not understanding the purpose of something is not only that there's an abuse, there's also an oppression that goes with abuse. In canon law, there is what we call the mind of the legislator. The mind of the legislator. What does that mean? It's connected with authentic interpretation of law. So what that means is that the legislator, as you know, is somebody who wrote the law, right? So the person who wrote the law knows why he wrote the law and the reason and what that law is there for to solve, because law is there to solve a problem. Now, that is connected with three things. So for a law to be understood, there are three things that has to be clear. What is the spirit behind the law? What is the principle behind the law? And what is the purpose behind the law? If not, then it becomes an instrument of oppression instead of being an instrument of restoration. Before I proceed, it's very good for us to understand the concept of Sabbath. The Sabbath law in the Bible, before it became a law, it was first of all a principle. Genesis chapter 2, verse 3. Where God created the world for 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. And not because God wanted to rest, but because he put as a principle, as a manual, because that's how we know that human being functions. And that's why there is day and night. Day is for activities, night is for sleep. Imagine how it will be when you are on activity all the time. For 3 days, you will die. So before it became a law, it was first of all a principle. And the principle woven into the dynamics of creation. And a Sabbath day, as you see from the principle, is after 6 days, then 1 day, last day, is for rest. There's a lot of sevens in the Bible, and that's significant. You theologians, you already know more than I do. Some say it means perfection, some means completion. We have Sabbath 7 day. We also have sabbatical year. For those who just left yesterday to complete part of his sabbatical year. So you stay for 6 years in a ministry. The 7th year, you go to rest. We also what we call Jubilee year. Now, let me explain this very well. Jubilee year, every year, every 7 years, there's a sabbatical year. Okay? So 7 sabbatical years is 7 times 7, which is 49, right? The 50th year is what we call the Jubilee year. And then the Jubilee year, which is the ultimate day of rest, Shabbat is to rest, ultimate day of rest is made in such a way that everything has to rest, even the land has to rest. For 1 year, no cultivation. The animals have to rest. Slaves are released. It's a total moment of restoration. And that's why we can understand what happens in Luke chapter 4 from verse 18 when Jesus entered the synagogue. And then he's proclaiming the day of Lord's favor. What's Lord's favor? It's the Jubilee year, the day of restoration, when prisoners have been released. The oppressed will be released. Good news for the poor. So that's the concept of sabbatical year. And Luke chapter 4, verse 18 to 21, you see that it began by saying that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Now, for us to understand what it means, because I mentioned about the connection of the law and the Spirit, because any law without the Spirit that is guiding it is an instrument of oppression. For us to understand Luke chapter 4 from verse 18 to 21, we need to read it in parallel with Numbers chapter 11. What is happening there? The Israelites were complaining in the wilderness. They complained, and at some point, Moses wanted to commit suicide. It was too much for him. He said, these people are complaining a lot. I can't manage them anymore. And then that's where the first principle of division of labor came from. If you are here and you are working too much and you don't want to bring people to help you, you will die. So God said, fine, get me 70 elders. And out of these 70 elders you get for me, I want you to, remember, Moses is the custodian of the law. He got it from the Mount Sinai. To let you know that before the law is given to him, the Spirit was also given to him first, so that he can have the mind of the legislator to give an authentic interpretation to the law. When the purpose of a thing is not understood, abuse is inevitable. So he gathered 70 elders, and in the tabernacle, they were in the camp, but he had to separate them to the tabernacle. And inside the tabernacle, he now released his Spirit on them. The Spirit in one man released on 70 elders, and all of them were prophesying. There is one so interesting. There are 2 of them who were not in the tabernacle. They were in the camp. They were not in where the Spirit was released. But because their name was in the list of the elders, they also received the Spirit. And they can't stop prophesying for 24 hours. One of them is Eldad, the other one is Medad. What is the essence? He's the custodian of the law. He can't just give them the law. He also needs to transmit the Spirit of the law to them from generation to generation. And of course, you know what happened with the disobedience of Israelites and everything that happened. Many centuries, long story cut short, we find ourselves in New Testament. Many years after that, the Spirit has left. What was remaining is an empty scroll. When a purpose of a thing is not understood, abuse is inevitable. And it was the time of Jesus. Now, there's a connection. When you hear about the Sanhedrin, the Council of Elders, is a kind of a connection with that Numbers chapter 11, 70 elders. They want to replicate it in the 70 councils of elders that you hear in the New Testament, the Sanhedrin. But now, it was already an empty scroll. And then, unfortunately, they have added to their own laws. And that's why you see Jesus trying to attack them in Matthew 15, verse 6, for elevating the tradition, their own tradition, more than the word of God. That's what he meant by that. So that, for example, and some of them are in the law, some of them they try to amplify, and they're oppressing people. Let me give you a few of the very ridiculous laws. One of the laws, sabbatical law, which the elders manufactured and created, is that on Sabbath day, women are not allowed to look into the mirror. And why? It is a preventive law so that they don't violate another sabbatical law, which says that on the Sabbath day, you are not allowed to remove a hair from your head. So when a woman looks into the mirror on a Sabbath day and probably see a white hair like mine, who is making her look old, she will remove the hair, and then she has violated the sabbatical law. And then for men, they are not even allowed at all to look into the mirror, whether Sabbath day or not, because it's considered undignified. Another Sabbath law is that you are not allowed to eat an egg laid on Sabbath day. Another ridiculous one is that you can't throw an object up on a Sabbath day and use the same hand you used to throw it to catch it. It will be considered over-laboring the hand. So they are now debating among themselves, is it okay to throw with one hand and then catch with the other? Could you imagine? Another one interesting is what we call sabbatical journey. You are not allowed to make more than 2,999 steps on the Sabbath day. And not only that, there are certain weight of load you cannot carry. And that's why you can understand in John chapter 5, where they rebuked the man, not because Jesus healed him, because Jesus has left when this man was healed, was because he was carrying his mat and was walking. He said, one, you have violated Sabbath law because you are carrying a load you're not supposed to carry. And two, we don't know how many steps you have taken. And the man was struggling to save his head. When the purpose of a thing is not understood, abuse is inevitable. And so many other ones. They're not allowed to climb a tree on the Sabbath day. And so they have made all these rules a burden to the people, because there are some of them that they added themselves. So that's why it's called the tradition of the elders. It's no longer the law of the Lord. What has this to do with us? Of course, some of you know that I'm a lecturer of canon law. I've realized that some parish priests use canon law to prove why things should not be done and how to frustrate the faithful, because they lack what you call the mind of the legislators. They look for opportunity to tell you no, instead of finding opportunity to say yes for the good soul of the faithful. And Jesus made it so clear. The law is not made for man. Man is not made for law, but it's for the use, it's for the benefit of man that the law is made. And it's very important that you understand that, because when you don't value human being, we value our tradition. Even in religious communities, ridiculous laws Ridiculous. Of course, law is good for structures. I'm not debating that. But when it becomes a problem that you don't look at human being first. For instance, the one institution, one of Jesuit school, of course, he said that scholars should not take a car, and then, of course, taking a car, okay, of course, you should not bash a car, And then, eventually, the car was bashed, And then the spirit, instead of asking, how is the man, he said, how is the car? Like, seriously. When the purpose of something is not understood, abuse is inevitable. That's the first point, very long one. My second point is what I call the wisdom of Messianic secret. You're all Bible scholars here. I'm not a Bibleist. But from this little thing I learned, in the book of Mark, there is a kind of a motif. Machera could confirm here because there are professors sitting, watching to know, like the way Jesus was, they are watching Jesus to know that he's going to fail. In the Gospel of Mark, there's what you call, there's a motif that you see run through the Gospel of Mark called Messianic secret, in which Jesus he was hiding his Messianic mission and identity. You see him, for example, in Mark chapter 1, verse 24, where the demon wanted to tell him that you are the Son of God, and he said, keep quiet. We see that when a leprosy was healed, he said, okay, after your healing, keep quiet, don't say anything about me. We also see that in Peter's confession, in Mark chapter 8, verse 29, and after the confession, he said, okay, that's who I am, but keep it quiet to yourself, don't say anything. And we see it in Transfiguration, where after the whole thing, Transfiguration, Peter, James, and John told them, don't say what you've seen. The wisdom of Messianic secret. Some biblical scholars have given reasons why this motif was there in the book of Mark, because you also find it here in this gospel. So some say, fine, he doesn't want them to know what his mission is about for the meantime, because they thought before that he's here to liberate them from the Roman Empire. So Jesus, so gradually, as we are reaching to Mark 15, 16, those motifs started diminishing, which means that his highest level of identity of messiahship is on the cross. That's where his messiahship is proclaimed. Now, for the Jews, they can't even imagine that, because that's not the concept of Messiah they have. But for me, I want to look at it from a different perspective. I could imagine that why Jesus was hiding his messianic mission and identity was because he doesn't want his ministry to be cut short even before it started. There's already a lot of turmoil, beginning from Mark chapter 2, his altercation with the religious elders. Imagine what would have happened. He would be killed before Mark chapter 16. And that also, we can look at it from a different perspective and also learn a lesson from that. Anything exposed before its time risk being destroyed before its purpose is manifested. The reason why there is a womb for the development of embryo and eventually for 9 months is because when a baby is born prematurely, it increases its chance. It lessens its chance for survival. You don't want to expose yourself before the time. That's why the time of obscurity is time of preparation. Because when you find yourself into a public arena, there's a lot of dynamics, there's a lot of character you need to maintain being in that arena. And that's why you hear that people rise and then they fall. The wisdom of Messianic secret. We are in a celebrity-obsessed generation. Everybody wants to be known. Everybody is seeking visibility. Everybody is giving podcasts, answering questions that are not being asked. On Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, creating platforms. Because of ego, we want to be known, we want to shine. And it doesn't matter. People want to even be popular. Don't wonder whether it's going to be, they're being popular in negative or positive way. They just want to be known. They want to be seen. The wisdom of Messianic secret. There's a story. I don't know how true this story is, but even if it's not true, we can learn something from it. There's a religious priest who has been sent to Germany to studies. Very brilliant, bright, extremely bright guy. And he has been sent to go and do his doctorate. And then he finishes his coursework, and then he began writing his proposal, and then he submitted it, and his supervisor was like, wow, this is groundbreaking, powerful. And the guy was so happy, as everybody would be. And then he began to write. He's supposed to write about 5 chapters. But when he reaches his 3rd chapter, the thesis was so good that they were inviting him to give seminars and conferences based on that 3 chapters. And that's where we see the brilliance of Ignatian discernment. That sometimes it's good to say no to good things, especially when those good things does not align to our priorities. He kept on, of course, when he goes to those conferences and give papers, people were like praising him and everything. Also, they give him some kind of stipend, and he was doing that and forgot that he came to do his doctorate. And in place of doing that, the scholarship that he got expired, and he was called back by the provincial. He never finished. Of course, let me underline. When people don't finish, doesn't mean that's the story. There are more things behind it. Sometimes the problem of also of the supervisors who frustrates a man. So don't misquote me. But that's the wisdom of Messiah. Imagine if this man has gone and laid his head low and finished first. So that when he's talking with an authority. Because with those 3 chapters, he can't even publish. Who is he? The wisdom of Messianic secret. You might be in a situation in your life here when you want to be known and exposed immediately. Be in obscurity, train yourself, develop your character. The time for your visibility is coming because there's wisdom in obscurity. I have to conclude. And finally, not finally, just to underline a point, you see, the Pharisees went out immediately, held counsel with Herodians against him. The Pharisees and the Herodians, they are not friends. Let's underline that. Why are they coming together? That's my next point. Be careful. There's a danger of what I call toxic solidarity. Toxic solidarity. They are gathering together just to cause harm to a man who is their common enemy, not because they are friends. Toxic solidarity destroys community. When you gather together, ask yourself for what purpose? The danger of toxic solidarity. For us to appreciate what happened today in the gospel, the condition of this man who his hand was withered, we need to understand his condition and what the restoration of Jesus actually did to him. Because if you don't, we might not really appreciate what really happened. This man has a withered hand. His withered hand might have affected him physically, economically, spiritually. He also might have affected his sense of identity. Hand is not just hand, but right hand is a symbol of strength. That's why you say hand work. You don't say leg work, hand work. So he might have been poor in some way because he's not providing for himself. His sense of identity might have been affected because people refer to him with his disability. But Jesus came and said, stretch out your hand. I'm sure when he told him stretch out his hand, he wanted to stretch out the one that was okay, but God cannot heal the one that you are not stretched. And that's the one that needs healing. And that's where I conclude my reflection. There is something always in our lives that can be symbolically or metaphorically referred as our withered hand. What is your withered hand? The withered hand is something that we are not proud of in our life that we want to hide. It shows up in many ways. We have even invisible withered hands. What is your withered hand? It could be your past mistakes. It could be heartbreak that makes you not to open yourself again to fall in love or to connect with people anymore because you're afraid of being hurt. It could be your academic struggle. You study so hard, but the result comes out, it's as if you're watching a movie or watching TikTok, but you know the energy you put in. You might be feeling underappreciated. Some of us are here with our worker or lecturers, as the case may be, but you feel underappreciated. Just the way the elder brother in the prodigal son felt. Told the father, you can't even give me a goat to celebrate with my friends. 1,000 Kenyan shillings just to drink beer with my friends. And I've been laboring so hard for you. The good news is whatever your withered hand is, there's a good news. God is not only willing but capable to heal your withered hand. It could be addiction. It could be your character. It could be your tongue. Whatever it is, God is ready to heal our withered hand. And He's there, the Eucharist, bring us hope, healing, and restoration. So we pray that God gives us courage to stretch our withered hand so that we might receive His healing and wholeness. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit.